My cheating wife tried to humiliate me with her lover and a chastity cage, but I turned the tables, exposed them, and took ruthless revenge. I'll never forget the look on my daughter's face when she said, "Dad, what kind of strange stuff are you watching?" My first thought was confusion, like, what is she even talking about? We were just wrapping up Christmas break, and she was using her mom's old laptop because I was on mine. I'd completely forgotten that Tammy had stopped using that computer months back, around her birthday when she got a new one. So when Robin walked in with this strange expression, holding the laptop out, I knew something was up. "What are you talking about?" I asked her, honestly clueless. She puts the computer on my desk, opens a folder filled with videos, and then says, "All these adult videos and this weird stuff on submission." I stared at the screen, stunned. I hadn't looked at that computer in ages. Those files weren't mine, and that's when it hit me. These were Tammy's videos, saved under some hidden folder. As I clicked through, I started to understand that this wasn't just some random thing she was watching. There were videos, articles, and files that all seemed connected, like they were building on some weird plan. Robin, trying to break the tension, just shrugs and says, "Guess I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. Relax." But inside, I was anything but relaxed. I kept asking myself, why would Tammy watch all this stuff, and for what? Robin just sits there staring at me, probably as confused as I was. And I have to admit, it felt wrong to involve her, but there was no way I could pretend that folder didn't exist or that I wasn't just as clueless as she was. I told her, "Look, this isn't even my computer. Your mom's the one who's been using it since last year." Curiosity got the best of us, so we kept digging. We found more folders, each one with even stranger content than the last. Articles about controlling your spouse, tips for manipulating someone into becoming submissive. Reading through them, it started to dawn on me. This wasn't just some weird hobby or phase Tammy was going through. This was a collection, like she was studying or planning something. The pieces didn't fit yet, but I had a bad feeling. A really bad feeling. I told Robin to keep this quiet. It wasn't something she needed to carry, and honestly, I didn't want Tammy to catch wind of us snooping. I promised to look into it further, but she should focus on college and let me handle it. She just nodded, looking unsure but trusting me enough to let it go. As she packed up to leave, though, I could tell she was just as worried as I was. When Robin left for college the next day, I sat down with Tammy's old laptop and opened every single folder on that computer. What I saw wasn't just adult content. It was full-on manipulation tactics, guides, discussions, even videos of other couples where one spouse controlled the other. I started noticing recurring names and usernames, people Tammy had been interacting with online. One name in particular, Senora B, kept popping up. Whoever this person was, she was advising Tammy on exactly how to mold me into a compliant, obedient husband. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a little quirk. My wife had been researching ways to control me. The whole thing felt surreal. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia or overthinking, but everything pointed in the same direction. I shut down the laptop, wondering what else I'd find if I kept looking, or worse, what I might have missed all this time. I didn't know exactly how far Tammy was planning to take this, but one thing was clear. Whatever I thought our marriage was, I was wrong, and now there was no unseeing any of it. After Robin left for college, I sat down and realized I had no choice but to dig deeper. Something about all this didn't add up, and I needed to know exactly what Tammy was planning. That first night after Robin left, I went back to the old laptop and combed through every folder, every file, trying to make sense of it all. The sheer amount of material she had on there was staggering. It was like a playbook on controlling your spouse, full of guides, articles, and endless emails exchanged with that person, Senora B. She seemed to be coaching Tammy step by step. In one of the first emails I found, Tammy had written that I was always agreeable and never put up a fight. Senora B responded by saying that I must be weak and that it would be easy to turn me into a submissive husband. That's how they described me. Weak, someone who'd go along with whatever Tammy wanted if she applied enough pressure. That word hit hard. I wasn't weak, I was just trying to avoid arguments, trying to make things smooth at home, but apparently they saw that as an opportunity to manipulate me. Senora B's advice wasn't subtle either. She told Tammy to start small, cut off intimacy, criticize everything I did, and make me do more of the household chores. She instructed her to make demands, then watch how I responded, and withhold any affection as a reward if I complied. According to Senora B, this would have trained me over time, like I was some kind of pet. I couldn't believe it. This was my wife, the person I trusted for 20 years, and here she was, following instructions to humiliate and control me. I didn't know whether to confront her right then, or play along to find out how far she was planning to go. But deep down, I had a feeling that if I exposed what I knew too early, she'd just find a way to cover her tracks. So I decided to keep watching. The more I read, the worse it got. There were messages from Tammy to Senora B about me starting to cave, which must have meant she was noticing me avoiding arguments or letting things slide. Then another message from Senora B encouraged her to make the ultimate threat, divorce. According to her, if I resisted, Tammy should tell me she'd leave me, take everything and leave me with nothing. It was calculated, cold, and it made my blood boil. The thought of Tammy rehearsing these threats or imagining me begging her to stay was almost too much to take. After a week of reading and rereading those messages, I finally decided to go through Tammy's new computer. I knew she had a habit of keeping passwords written down in her desk, so one afternoon while she was out, I went into her office. Sure enough, there was her little notebook of passwords just sitting there in the drawer. I found the one for her new laptop, unlocked it, and sure enough, there were even more messages, recent ones with Senora B and others. I even found references to a separate email account she'd been using. This new email account was where she'd been planning the next steps, and it's where I discovered a different side of her plans. She was talking to someone named Steven, who she referred to as her bull. I had no idea what that meant at first, but as I read further, it became clear. Steven was the guy she intended to use to really drive home this so-called submissive lifestyle for me. The idea was that he'd come over, I'd watch him with her, and that would supposedly break me. I felt sick just reading it. As I closed her laptop, I knew I'd crossed the line. There was no coming back from what I'd found, and I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't just let this go. Whatever Tammy thought she had planned, I wasn't going to be her pawn in it. Once I had a clearer picture of what Tammy was planning, I knew I couldn't go into this blindly. I mean, I'd never thought about divorce seriously before, but with everything I'd found, there was no way I could just let it slide. I needed to be prepared, so I started looking for a good divorce lawyer, someone sharp and experienced. That's how I ended up with Jack Stone, one of the best in town. Sitting across from him in his office felt strange, like admitting to myself that my marriage was truly over, but Jack didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. I told him everything, about the emails, the manipulation plan, even the bull she was planning to bring into our home. Jack just listened, nodding like he'd heard it all before. When I finished, he gave me a clear strategy, gather every bit of evidence, and prepare for a tough battle. I wasn't going to lose everything I'd worked for. Jack explained that if Tammy threatened me with divorce, thinking she'd walk away with everything, she was in for a surprise. He had a plan to protect our assets, especially with the evidence I had. He made it clear that with her tactics, she'd likely end up losing more than she imagined. Leaving that meeting, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. For the first time, I had an actual plan, and I wasn't just sitting around waiting to see what Tammy would do next. And to be honest, I was ready to play along if that's what it took. Jack warned me not to make any sudden moves and to keep up the act at home. Tammy had to believe she still had the upper hand. I kept Robin in the loop about everything, and I could tell she was furious. She couldn't believe her mom was actually going through with this, trying to turn me into some obedient servant. "Dad, don't let her win," she'd say, and I promised her I wouldn't. But it was hard pretending everything was normal around Tammy. Every day, I had to act like I was none the wiser, going along with her subtle commands, doing whatever she asked, knowing she thought she was breaking me down. It was degrading, sure, but I also knew it was all adding fuel to my fire. Meanwhile, Jack was working on setting up our assets in a way that would shield a good portion from her. One suggestion he had was putting a large sum into a fund for Robin's college. That way, if Tammy tried to get it all in the divorce, she'd find out that a big part of our money was already safely out of her reach. That was smart. I knew Tammy wouldn't expect me to make moves like that. The weirdest part of all this was acting submissive around her, like I was just giving in. It started to annoy her, probably because she expected me to resist more. There was one night where she hinted that if I did everything perfectly, we might get intimate. I played along, did every little task she asked for just to see what she'd do. And then, of course, she rejected me last minute, probably thinking it would break me down a little more. I just nodded and kept quiet. Inside, though, I was just counting down the days until I could blow this whole thing wide open. The final piece was Steven. I kept tabs on his interactions with Tammy and tracked every message. Tammy had no idea I knew about him or that I'd found his wife's contact information. Jack told me that if we needed leverage, we could use this to get her to agree to a fair split, and I didn't mind at all. If this meant dragging Steven's wife into it, if he was ready to wreck my marriage, he deserved to see what his actions would cost him. With everything in place, I felt like I was watching a storm build up, knowing exactly where it would hit. Tammy was clueless, still trying to push her plan forward while I built my defense. I wasn't afraid of what was coming, I was ready for it. She thought she was controlling the game, but by now she had no idea I'd already flipped the script. Friday night finally came, the night Tammy had been hinting at for weeks. I knew she had something planned, and I was ready. I'd already met with my lawyer, had all my evidence organized, and honestly I was just waiting to see how far she was going to take this. By then I'd read enough of her emails with Senora B to know exactly what she had in mind. According to her consultant, tonight was supposed to be my breaking point. Little did she know, I'd planned a breaking point of my own. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in after work. She looked a little nervous, glancing up at me like she was expecting me to just bow down. I had a digital recorder in my pocket, ready to catch every word. I barely had a chance to set my things down before she said, "Kevin, sit down. I need to talk to you about something." She tried to sound firm, like she was the one in control. I almost laughed at the effort. I sat down across from her, keeping my expression blank, waiting. She took a deep breath, then started laying out her new rules for our marriage. "First of all," she began, "I'm going to have a lover. He's coming over tonight, and this will be a regular thing. You'll be helping out around the house, keeping things in order, and following my instructions without question." She paused, waiting to see my reaction, but I just nodded, letting her think I was going along with it. Then she slid a small, gift-wrapped box across the table, telling me that there was a special gift inside. I opened it, and there it was, a chastity cage. I'd seen similar things in her weird training videos, but seeing her actually push it at me was something else. "You're going to wear this from now on," she said, sounding like she was trying to be stern. "And I'm going to be the only one with the key. If you don't agree to this," she added with a slight shake in her voice, "there will be consequences." I couldn't help it. I let out a small laugh which seemed to throw her off. Her face twisted, like she was trying to regain control. "What's funny, Kevin? This is serious." "Oh, I know it's serious, Tammy," I replied, pulling my phone from my pocket. I pressed a button and calmly sent a prepared email to Steven's wife. Then I dialed my daughter Robin. "Yes, sweetheart, she just laid down the rules," I said into the phone, loud enough for Tammy to hear. "She even gave me a chastity cage, if you can believe that." Tammy's face went white. I'd barely finished the call before she was stammering, trying to get control back, but it was too late. I reached for my briefcase and took out a folder, laying it on the table. "Tammy," I said, "we need to talk about your little plan." Her jaw dropped, and her confidence vanished in an instant. I looked her in the eye and went over everything she just said, repeating it back to her. "Let me get this straight. You want to bring another man into our home tonight? You expect me to watch, and you want me to wear this contraption," I said, gesturing at the cage. "And if I don't go along with this, you're going to divorce me, take everything I've worked for, and leave me with nothing?" She barely nodded, visibly shaken. "Good," I said, sliding the divorce papers across the table. "Here's my answer to that." Then, as if on cue, my phone rang. It was Steven's wife, furious, demanding to know what was going on. I put her on speaker. "Hey, Steven, just so you know, I'm sitting here with your little play partner," I said, watching Tammy's face as she turned pale. Steven's response was exactly what I expected, angry, desperate threats. "Kevin, you son of a—" he started to yell, but I calmly cut him off, letting him know I'd already shared all their intimate details with his wife. By now, Tammy was shaking, completely thrown off by everything I'd just revealed. I made it clear to her that this whole fantasy of hers was over. I told her I'd been collecting evidence for weeks and had no intention of letting her walk all over me. And as I sat there, watching the shock and defeat sink in on her face, I couldn't help but feel like I'd finally regained the upper hand. After that showdown with Tammy, things started moving fast. I filed for divorce the next day. My lawyer Jack put the paperwork in immediately, and it was like everything kicked into overdrive. I was ready to put an end to this whole twisted mess. Tammy, on the other hand, had a complete meltdown when she got served. She couldn't believe I was serious. She called me, crying, trying to pull the "it was just a mistake, Kevin, you don't really want to do this" card. But there was no going back. I'd seen enough. A week later, we met in Jack's office to discuss the terms. She showed up with her own lawyer, a guy who seemed more like a used car salesman than a professional. Jack had already warned me about this type, calling him all bark, no bite. Sure enough, he tried to make a show of things, claiming they would fight any unfounded accusations and even threaten to expose me if I kept pushing for divorce. I just looked at Jack, who was trying not to laugh. He opened a folder, casually pushed a few pictures across the table, and leaned back, letting them do the talking. These photos were ones I'd already shown Tammy during our little kitchen conversation, photos of her with Stephen, and some clear enough to show who was in them. Her lawyer froze, eyes going wide, while Tammy just sat there staring down, speechless. Jack didn't stop there. He pulled out the chastity cage Tammy had thrown at me that night and set it down on the table for everyone to see. Tammy looked like she wanted to disappear. Her lawyer tried to recover, claiming that none of this proved anything and that we were taking things out of context. Jack interrupted, cool and calm. "The context," he said, "is a betrayal of over 20 years of marriage, documented with both witness and photo evidence." Then he listed off the financial split we were requesting, half of everything, including her business. Her lawyer looked ready to argue until Jack presented one more document, a copy of Tammy's business loan application. According to that, her business was valued at over $1 million, a number she'd now conveniently tried to downplay. If she contested it, Jack reminded them, she'd be admitting to perjury and possibly mail fraud. Suddenly, her lawyer went silent. For Tammy, though, this was personal. She finally spoke up, turning to me with that sweet fake voice she used to get her way. "Kevin," she started, "we don't have to do this. I was trying to find ways to make our marriage exciting again. Stephen was never anything serious, I swear." She tried to sound innocent, but I was done. I didn't say a word, just let her dig herself deeper. Jack wrapped up the meeting by restating our terms and suggesting they consider it carefully. They knew they had no real ground to stand on, and after seeing the evidence, even her lawyer looked defeated. We agreed to meet again in a few days, but Jack and I both knew this was the beginning of the end for her case. Over the next week, Tammy tried everything. She called me, emailed me, even left voicemails begging me to rethink the divorce. She went from apologetic to furious and back again, as if one of those approaches might work on me. But I wasn't about to be manipulated any longer. Then she started trying to get to Robin, calling her, texting her nonstop, saying how heartbroken she was that her own daughter was turning against her. Robin wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, she blocked Tammy's number and told me she didn't want to talk to her mother until everything was finalized. That second meeting in Jack's office was even shorter than the first. Tammy's lawyer came in looking defeated, like he knew they'd already lost. They offered a smaller settlement, but Jack didn't budge. He made it clear that if they didn't agree to our terms, we'd be taking it to court with all the evidence on full display. At that point, I could see Tammy realizing that she was out of options. She'd gone from smugly planning to control my life to sitting there, watching everything she thought she controlled fall apart. When she finally agreed to the settlement, I knew it was over. We finalized the details, and just like that, the 20 years we'd spent together were done. Tammy was left to deal with the fallout of her own actions, and I walked away knowing I'd stood my ground, finally free of her twisted plans. A couple of months after we settled the divorce, I thought I'd finally seen the last of Tammy's manipulations. I had my half of the assets, including a good chunk from her business sale, and I was moving on with my life. But then, one night, there she was at my front door. She looked rough, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy, her eyes red and puffy. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. She stood there in silence for a minute, and I just watched her, wondering what she could possibly want now. Finally, she managed to speak. "Kevin," she said, her voice shaky, "please, can we talk?" I thought about slamming the door in her face, but something made me pause. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe a small part of me wanted to see her realize how far she'd fallen. I stepped aside and let her in, but I didn't offer her a seat or anything. We stood in the hallway, and she started rambling, almost like she'd rehearsed it. She went on about how everything had fallen apart since the divorce, how she'd lost the business, how Robin wouldn't speak to her. She sounded desperate, talking about how she never thought things would go this far. "Please, Kevin," she begged, "can you at least help me fix things with Robin? She won't return my calls. She hates me. I know I can't change what happened between us, but she's my daughter." I just looked at her, feeling a mix of pity and anger. She wanted my help fixing things with Robin after all the lies, the manipulation. She thought I'd just swoop in and make things better for her. "Tammy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "Robin's an adult. She's seen everything for herself. You put me through hell, and you expected her to go along with it. And now you want me to somehow make her forgive you?" I shook my head. "That's something you're going to have to figure out on your own." Her face fell, and for the first time I saw real regret in her eyes. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook. I was done with her manipulations, done with the guilt trips. She had dragged me through the mud, tried to destroy my life, and now that she was left with nothing, she wanted me to somehow put the pieces back together. She tried one last time, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Kevin. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I don't know what I was thinking. I got caught up in everything Senora B told me, in the excitement, and I thought it was what I wanted. I didn't realize how much it would cost me until it was too late." I crossed my arms and stared at her, unfazed. "Too late," I repeated. "Yeah, you're right about that. You were ready to take everything from me, and you thought I'd just lie down and let it happen. Well, guess what? You're the one who's left with nothing now. You tried to put me in a cage, and instead you ended up in one of your own making." Tammy's shoulders slumped, and she looked defeated. I could tell she was searching for something, anything that might get her some sympathy, but there was nothing left between us. The 20 years we'd had together felt like another lifetime, like it belonged to someone else. All I felt now was relief that I'd escaped. After a long, painful silence, she turned and headed for the door. She didn't look back, and neither did I. When the door clicked shut behind her, I felt like a weight had been lifted. I was free, truly free, and for the first time in years I could breathe again. Tammy would have to face the consequences of her choices on her own. I wasn't there to save her, and I had no plans of ever looking back. She was finally out of my life, and I planned to keep it that way.